We do not belong to the land. The land belongs to the journey. For the Tuareg, culture is not anchored in a single place, but shaped through journeys that are remembered and passed down. In this worldview, the road does not lead to a destination, it becomes the story itself. The Sahara Desert is not an undefined empty space. For the Tuareg, it is a familiar landscape, remembered through routes, stopping points, and signs that only those who live with the desert can recognize. Here, living space is not defined by fixed boundaries, but by repeated movements shaped by seasons, water sources, and the rhythm of community life. Tuareg life is organized around the journey. Caravans connect stopping points, forming a familiar network that stretches across the Sahara, from northern Mali and Niger to present-day Algeria and Libya. These routes are not only essential for survival, but also carry memory, experience, and relationships between different groups.
Bon, faut pas que je te retarde. Je vais poser mon sac.
Each journey is guided by knowledge accumulated over generations: how to read the land, how to anticipate the weather, and how to find water in an environment that is constantly changing. In this context, the idea of home is not tied to a specific place. Home exists in the familiarity of the road, in the ability to navigate open space, and in knowing one's place within a web of relationships. Movement does not mean leaving, it is a natural part of the way life is lived. From this way of organizing life, Tuareg culture takes shape. It does not remain fixed in one location, but moves with people across each stage of the journey. And when culture is lived in motion, the markers of identity cannot rely solely on where one lives. They must be expressed through roles, responsibilities, and the way people are present within a shared journey, opening the next layer of the story. When life is organized around movement, a community cannot rely on place to define identity. For the Tuareg, the question of who is not answered by addresses or land, but by each person's role within the shared journey. For this reason, social markers become especially important, and they are expressed directly through clothing and everyday practices. One of the most recognizable markers is the tagelmust, the face veil worn by Tuareg men. The tagelmust is not worn from childhood. It is associated with adulthood, marking the moment when a man begins to take on clearer social responsibilities within the community.
هذا خروف الشيخ ها مجهد الشيخ هذا شيخ كيفاش
شيخ ما ناخذ
منه
اثنين قد
كيف ما فهمتك
قد نقسم ونقلع منه اثنين كيف الغنم ذيك الداخل
انت رومانيا هذه.
Covering the face does not signify concealment or separation, but follows a shared code that expresses dignity, self-control, and social standing within the collective journey. In the open desert, where people encounter one another directly and frequently, this marker helps the community recognize who has entered an adult role and assumed responsibility.
Comme ça. Ça, et après on range. C'est comme ça. Celui-là, j'ai fait 3 tours. Tu vois? Pas comme celui-là. Celui-là, il faisait juste 2,5 mètres. Et celui-là, il faisait 6 mètres.
If men's dress is closely tied to movement and the journey, women's roles are linked to stability within that movement. Tuareg women maintain the tent, not only in a physical sense, but in a social one. The tent is the center of daily life, the place where family relationships are sustained, and the space where memory is passed from one generation to the next. When the community moves, the tent may be set up and taken down, but the woman's role in maintaining family life and lineage remains continuous. Within this structure, identity is not defined by who travels farther or who stays longer, but by the role each person holds so that the journey can continue. Men are associated with guiding, protecting, and connecting stages of movement. Women are associated with maintaining living space, family relationships, and collective memory. These roles do not stand in opposition, but complement one another, creating the balance required for a life without fixed settlement. From this perspective, Tuareg identity is not tied to where they are, but to how they participate in the shared journey. Their culture does not reside at a point of origin or a final destination, but in the coordination of roles that allow the community to continue moving and existing. This organization enables culture to live in motion, rather than being fixed to a single place. However, when a culture is built upon movement, it also becomes sensitive to changes in the surrounding world. When familiar routes are no longer as open as before, the question is not only whether movement can continue, but how the roles and relationships that form this identity can be sustained. From here, the story moves into its next layer, where traditional movement encounters new limits set by the modern world. Tuareg life is built around movement. For many generations, familiar journeys have been more than routes for survival. They have formed the foundation for maintaining social roles, community relationships, and cultural identity. However, the world around them continues to change, and these changes gradually affect the very structure of nomadic life. Today, spaces once experienced as continuous are becoming more clearly divided. Administrative borders, new forms of governance, and changing environmental conditions mean that movement no longer follows the familiar patterns of the past. Routes once remembered through experience and collective memory now have to be adjusted to fit new circumstances. This does not mean that Tuareg life has suddenly ended or disappeared. In reality, many communities continue to adapt, finding ways to preserve core practices while adjusting the rhythm of everyday life. Some journeys become shorter, some roles are reorganized, and new forms of daily activity emerge alongside tradition.
Marie, si tu veux, on aime bien jouer Marie.
Si tu veux, on aime bien jouer à la marée.
It is at this point that the most important question arises. When a culture is shaped by movement, what allows it to continue when movement is no longer completely free as before? The answer does not lie in trying to keep everything unchanged, but in the ability to adapt without losing the fundamental principles that have held the community together.
ديالها الصحراء كامل اول بارزه.
La première forme de valise du désert.
والله
Ça, c'est une valise.
كانوا يشوف ملان يقول لهم العظم شوف شريتي وعيبتي لي شوف والسماره وبطيح وجميع.
For the Tuareg, identity has never depended solely on how far they travel or where they stop. It lies in how each individual continues to fulfill their role in relation to others, even as the form of the journey changes. As long as these roles remain recognizable, respected, and passed down, the culture continues to exist, even if it no longer looks exactly the same as before. From this perspective, home is not a fixed point that can be marked on a map. Home exists in shared memory, in the familiarity of relationships, and in the way the community maintains connection even as living conditions change. Culture does not disappear because the world changes, it changes form in order to continue. The story of the Tuareg, therefore, is not one of loss, but of transition. It reminds us that some cultures are not built to remain still, and that their vitality lies in the ability to keep moving along new paths, while still carrying the values that have shaped who they are. The journey of the Tuareg shows that not every culture is built around a fixed point. Some communities exist through movement, by adapting and maintaining social order within that very motion. When surrounding conditions change, this way of life must also adjust. What is remarkable, however, is that identity does not disappear along with change. Perhaps that is why, for the Tuareg, home does not need to be marked on a map. It is recognized through relationships, shared journeys, and the values that endure amid transformation. You can follow World Discovery to continue exploring similar stories. Thank you for spending your time with this video.